Welcome, everyone. Kevin Carpenter here with Dave Abrahams, and this is my first time getting to interview Dave. I know you from C++ now mostly. I mean, I've seen you at other conferences, but I will say C++ now is, I think, where I got to interact with you most.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but I actually started that conference. Yeah. I mean, and it was called BoostCon at the time, but it's one of the things that I'm proudest of in my contributions to the programming community. I just always loved that venue, and yeah, people still tell me, it's the best conference, despite everything that's happened since. And I haven't had anything to do with it in many years.
It's funny you say that because I just got done, you know, Christy and I were just there. This was actually our last year just because things have gotten so busy. But I did a I did a lightning talk that was basically talking about it was one of the best sets of 3 years, best volunteers, great experience. I mean, you know, the lead up to it, I was calling it Code Camp for C++ because it's just unique that way. I
Yeah.
mean, so that is really cool. Thank you for, all the part. Cause I was looking at your resume and it's like the amount of time you spent with Boost is incredible too.
Well, yeah, I'm old. I think
Uh,
that's,
okay, come
that's
on.
what,
I am too. I just shave it off. So, I hide the gray that way.
okay.
But you have me by a few years, I'm sure.
Could be.
Well, yeah. I was looking at it just because of I was saying before we started recording, it's like Dragon software. I remember using their voice recognition. And so what was that like way back in that day, writing software
Uh,
for Dragon?
well, that was, that was my second real programming job. Before that, I spent 11 years working for a company called Mark of the Unicorn doing music notation software and
Oh,
music
wow.
software in general. Um, and so thinking back to Dragon, that's where I learned Python at Dragon. I learned it from Tim Peters himself. I don't know if you know who Tim Peters is. Um,
I, the name sounds familiar because I only started learning Python. So my depth is not near what yours is.
well, so if you fire up Python and type import this, um, you will get a little koan that Tim composed. It's a little Easter egg in Python, and it sort of uh, encapsulates the design ethos of Python. Uh, so so that was pretty cool. And what we were working on was, I guess, the precursor to this. Um, well, precursor to Siri and this. Yeah. So we were
Yep.
working on the the PDA with voice recognition built into it, and yeah, that was pretty exciting until until Dragon was purchased by a company that had no. They were a hollow shell, and and Dragon basically became extinct then. But but yeah, that was a lot of fun, and trying to remember where we were with Boost at that time. Yeah, I'm I'm not sure whether we had started it yet. Let's see what. Oh, that was after '98 though, right? Yeah, so
Yeah.
we must have had Boost for a few years by then.
Yeah. I saw you were, Boost, you started 1998, because you were showing like 15 years on Boost
Like,
and the C++ committee. And I mean, that's what Boost was that originally, I know a lot of things from Boost made it into the committee. Was that kind of your idea from the beginning that Boost would be that precursor?
well, let's be clear. I think a lot of people give me credit for starting Boost, but it actually wasn't my idea. It was actually the idea of Beeman Dawes. And I don't know if you know about Beeman passed away a few years ago, but he's one of my favorite people. And uh, he was the chair of the library evolution working group when I started working with the C++ committee, and not evolution working group, library working group.
Yep.
And his what he noticed, so basically the standard was, first version was finalized in 98, and what was supposed to happen then was 10 years of stability where we just fixed bugs. And
Uh-huh.
the idea of that is if a standard is changing all of the time, nobody takes it seriously as a standard,
Right.
right? Um, so so Beeman looked back at the history of how we got to C++ 98 and where the libraries came from. And he noticed one of the things we were supposed to always be doing in library and in the core language was standardizing existing practice. So the idea is you should have stuff out there in the world functioning and proven out in people's actual usage before you start making it a standard. And he thought, yeah, we really cut a lot of corners with the standardizing existing practice. There were a lot of things that came into C++. They were designed they were designed and standardized before they were ever implemented.
Is it
And some of those were actually generics features that were required in order to fulfill Alex Stepanov's vision of the STL. So, I don't regret all of those. Those in particular, I think were really important. But Beeman's thought was, well, okay, we have 10 years where we can't do anything on the standard. Where are the next libraries going to come from? When 10 years is up, how are we going to expand the standard library? And we wanted to do it with libraries that had all of the proving out in the real world that we hadn't had before. So so his idea was, let's make it open source. Let's as unencumbered as possible so everybody would feel free to use it. And let's make sure that it was documented at a level that was consistent with what is required for the standard, and follow best practices as tested as possible. And the other thing that really came out of that effort was, I think Boost was the first group that worked on the science of library design.
okay?
What how do you do this thing of creating a reusable artifact that's suitable for standardization?
Mhm.
So so all that came out of Boost, and it came out of Beeman's idea, and he asked me to participate very early on, and so I was essentially one of the founding members. But it was his idea.
That's okay. So that's one very cool because I didn't know the backstory. And the reason it's also really cool is, at C now, we just did library in a week
Neat.
and they kind of formalize things with the Beeman project. And, you know, volunteer coordinator does not see talks generally. We don't get to do much, but I heard about it and now it's like, so thank you very much. That's a complete circle. That's really cool.
Yeah, and totally, there's a website. Go look at beemanproject.org. Uh, Last I looked, it was still missing a tribute page to Beeman himself, but I talked to David Sankel about that, and we're going to get that up there. But it's an exciting future for C++ libraries.
That's really cool. So I was originally calling and chatting with you because of Hylo. So you're going to give the keynote at CppCon.
Is it just one keynote? I'm the keynote.
There's multiple keynotes, but you kick it off.
That's true.
So that's
That's true.
you know, there's the anchor at the end, and then there's the launching
Yeah.
things, and that's super exciting. So have you been to CppCon before?
Not yet. No.
Oh, this is excellent. So we get two brand new pieces here. So I'm super excited to see there. I love the venue. Hylo. So what's
Okay.
that like coming up with a language? I mean,
Well, it's not my first. Um,
no,
right.
it's not, but
So, I learned a lot, of, an immense amount from my participation in the C++ committee. And,
good.
um, I took that into, my job at Apple working on the Swift language. And, that was super exciting. I guess, you know, it was sort of back around when I got involved with the C++ committee that I started to realize that my professional mission is to empower other programmers. And, and a programming language is a great way to do that if you do it right. Um, and, I've also, sorry to all you C++ devotees, but at some point I started to realize that C++ is not the best vehicle for that. Um,
Yeah.
right. There's for reasons that are totally understandable, right? 30 years of legacy and evolution, and people were learning things, and some of the problems are my fault. so mea culpa. But if we want to make programmers more powerful, we need to give them really well designed tools. And so that's what working on Swift was about for me, and that's also what working on Hylo is about for me. So the it, presumably you want to know what the idea behind Hylo is. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the most important things about Swift, from my point of view, is its first class support for value semantics, which
Okay.
is coming from C++. Everybody sort of takes that value semantics exists for granted, but it's actually quite rare among programming languages. And I sort of I consider it fundamental for writing code that you can reason locally about. Like,
Right.
I don't think there should be anything else. And Swift um, had to admit reference semantics in order to interoperate with Objective C. And
Okay.
there's maybe one other place where reference semantics creeps into the language that could have been avoided. But in any case, I mean, I think Swift is a terrific language, but I wanted to write the thing that was really just all about value semantics, and and so it actually came out of a lot of work exploring what value semantics actually means. So after I left Apple, I went to Google for a little over a year, and and one of the things that we started doing when I was at Google was writing papers about value semantics and what it means, because we talk to people, especially in the AI community, who are all using Python, which has, it's reference semantics everywhere. Um,
Yes.
uh, we would talk to them about what it means to program with values, and it would like blow their minds. Like they could not even relate to it. Right. So
Right.
we thought it was at least important to get the foundation out there. And as part of that, uh, work, we wrote some papers, and then and then uh, at some point, I was watching the Swift forums, and this researcher said, you know, uh, uh, this researcher showed up who had written something they called Tiny Swift, and uh, and Dimi said, I tried to capture, the important essence of Swift,
Right.
and I looked at it and I was like, okay, so where's the value semantics? And there was no value semantics. So I pointed this out, and and to much to my surprise, Dimi was extremely receptive to this idea and got really excited about making that the focus of things. And out of that, pretty soon Dimi was incorporated into our research work on value semantics. And one of the things you do in programming language research is you write little languages to prove out your ideas. And so there were tiny value semantic languages that got developed out of that. And at some point, Dimi said, I've got this thing called val, and it's starting to become, a little bit more mature. And we looked at it and, pretty excited about the idea of making it real. And at that point, it was, it, you know, when I got to work on Swift, I was joining a project that was funded by one of the largest companies in the world,
Right.
and their future depended on it. And so it you know it was clearly had a big chance of success. Right, it had a lot
Cool.
going for it, but new languages come and go and die in obscurity every day. Right,
Yeah.
that's like for most efforts don't go anywhere. So
Right.
so when we were talking about Hylo, there was this background thinking, I think this could take over the world and be the best thing, but also at the same time, like nobody wants to say that because
Right.
yeah. So for a long time it was we really talked about it as experimental. Um,
Mhm.
but we reached a point in the last year or so where we thought, this is becoming mature enough that we can talk about our true intentions, right? Which is to make it a real thing that makes a real difference for programmers.
So
Mm,
that's really cool. And I haven't checked it out yet, but now I'm going to have to. But I do want to ask this. So
nice.
on one hand, we're at a C++ conference. I can imagine that even if you aren't necessarily into Hylo as a language, that the amount that you probably learned from your talk, just even on value semantics and the research, I mean, because that's a thing like CPP2, which, Herb came up with, which I, at the same time, when I was talking to him, he was saying the kind of same thing. It's like proving out those things that we could improve on. So at least you learn from it. So it'll be awesome if your language does become the next, I like Hylo better than Rust just as a name. I'm just saying. But to that end, it's like there's things I think that you end up learning that apply backwards. Do they not?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, I'm doing this talk because Phil asked me to, right? So I
Yes.
didn't I didn't think, oh, let me submit a talk to the C++ conference about my language, right?
Right.
So I think I I trust that Phil has some idea what C++ programmers are interested in, and uh, I always hope to deliver insight. That's when I give a talk, I don't want it to just be information
Okay.
because you can get that anywhere, right? Um, so, um, so, I hope it'll be great for people, but, yeah, it's about a different programming language, not the one you're using. Um,
That's really cool. I'm excited to see it. And fortunately, it'll be the first keynote. So that's the one I typically get the break for because everybody finished registration. So I'll be able to hop in and watch.
all right.
Excited to see you there, Dave. And, you know, I think somebody said 46 days out. So,
Is that all? I have a talk to write. Oof.
Yeah, your skill, I'm sure you could probably write it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, of all nighters. Well,
Hey, and I'm sure you'll still be working on slides as you come down the train to Folkestone.
well, I really hope not because actually, I'm the conference is at the end of a family vacation I'm taking,
Oh,
so
it's like
I kind of need to have it done well in advance.
motivation. I
Well,
understand that.
yeah,
I still picked. I had one of my talks get picked for. I did a kind of a basic talk, almost always vector,
yeah.
and I'm coming off the same thing. Before we get to CPP on C, the family's meeting me in Europe, and I'm like, yeah, I just don't know. With all the volunteering stuff, I don't know that that's going to happen. So
Mm. All
maybe
right.
next
Well, good luck.
time. Well, I will see you in Folkestone.
All right.
Thank you for your time today.
Hey, it was fun. See you.